before it hits the ground. I was checking the fence one last time before it got completely dark when I heard it, a sound that shouldn't be there. I thought it was a wild dog at first. Then I saw a trail of blood in the snow. She was about 30 yards away, crawling. A child was dragging something wrapped in oiled cloth, and her fingers were squeezed around it so tight, I don't think she could have let go even if she wanted to. Her coat was ripped all the way through at the shoulder. When she reached the fence post, she looked up at me. Her face was purple and white, frostbite attacking the edges. She said, "I'm not real without the paper," she whispered. "Am I real, mister?" I picked her up. That's when I saw it. A burn mark on her shoulder blade. The letter W, the same mark Silas Whitfield used on his cows. The smell of burned skin still stuck to her even under the cold. I carried her toward the cabin. Behind me, a lantern bounced up the trail through the trees. Someone was coming to get her. I kicked the cabin door shut behind me and put her by the fire. She didn't let go of that oiled cloth pouch. Her breathing came shallow and fast, the kind of breathing that says the body is almost done fighting. I grabbed the kettle off the hook and poured warm water into a tin cup. Not hot. Hot would have shocked her body. Just warm enough to remind her blood it had a job to do. The coat I wrapped around her had belonged to my daughter. Martha dead 3 years now. A terrible fever. The cloth still smelled a little like lavender soap, the kind my wife used to make before she died. The girl didn't ask questions, just pulled it tight and stared at the flames like they were the first real thing she'd seen in a long time. "Can you drink?" I asked. She nodded. I held the cup to her lips. Her hands shook too badly to hold it herself. She took 3 small sips, then turned her head away. I set the cup down and added another log to the fire. The wood cracked and popped, sparks climbing toward the chimney. Outside, the wind screamed like it was trying to get in. I didn't ask her name yet. Didn't ask where she'd come from or why. A man learns living alone as long as I have. That silence is sometimes the kindest thing you can give. I pulled a chair close and sat where she could see me, but not so close I'd scare her. She was watching me now, eyes moving between my face and the rifle leaning against the wall. "You're safe here," I said. "Nobody's going to hurt you." She didn't believe me. I could see that clearly enough, but she was too tired to run, so she just sat there holding that pouch like it was the only proof she'd ever lived. An hour passed, maybe 2. The fire burned steady. I heated soup from the pot I'd made that morning. Deer meat and wild onion, nothing fancy. The smell filled the cabin, rich and earthy. I poured some into a bowl and set it on the floor beside her. She stared at it a long time before she touched it. When she finally did, she ate slowly, like someone who'd learned the hard way that food could be taken away. I was fixing a leather strap when she spoke again. "My name's Cora," she said. Her voice was small but steady. "Cora Whitfield. Whitfield." I knew that name. Everybody in Elkhorn knew Silas Whitfield. He owned the land office, held papers on half the businesses in town, a man with money and lots of ways to use it. I'd borrowed $340 from his bank last fall to buy winter feed for the horses. The bill came due in April. "Are you related?" I asked. "His niece." She looked down at the pouch in her lap. "My daddy died in October. Horse accident during Roundup. After that, Uncle Silas said I had to come live with him. And now you're here." "Yes, sir," I didn't push. A child doesn't run through a snowstorm at night unless staying is worse. I stood and pulled a blanket from the shelf, shook it out, and draped it over the back of the chair. "You can sleep there tonight," I said, pointing toward the corner where I kept an extra bedroll. "I'll be right here if you need anything." She nodded, but she didn't move toward the bedroll, just sat there, staring at the fire. After a while, her head started to drop forward. Her fingers loosened on the pouch. I thought she might be asleep. Then her eyes snapped open again, wide and scared. "He's coming," she whispered. "Who?" "Uncle Silas, he always comes." As if the words had called him, I heard it. The bang of a fist against the cabin door. 3 heavy blows, then a voice cutting through the wind. "Jacob Brennan, open this door." I stood. The girl pulled the coat tighter around herself. I could see the fear in her eyes, the way her whole body went stiff. I picked up the rifle and checked it was loaded. It was ready. It had been ready for years. "Stay by the fire," I told her. I walked to the door and opened it just wide enough to see out. Silas Whitfield stood on the other side, his face red from cold and anger. He was a tall man, dressed nicely, Even out here in the snow, his coat lined with fur. Behind him, the lantern light made his shadow stretch long and crooked across the ground. "That's my niece you got in there," he said. "That's a child," I said. "And she's hurt. She's a runaway. I'm her legal guardian." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Got the judge's signature right here. Now step aside or I'll be back in the morning with the marshal." I looked at him a long time. Then I said, "Bring him." I shut the door. Outside, Silas Whitfield cursed once, loud and sharp. Then I heard his boots crunching back through the snow. The lantern light faded. I set the rifle down and turned back to the fire. Cora was asleep finally, still holding that oiled cloth pouch like a prayer. I sat in the chair and watched the flames. My hands remembered this. Feeding a child, keeping them warm, listening for their breath in the dark. I knew then someone was coming for her, and I knew I wasn't going to let her go. A week passed before Silas did what he threatened. In that time, Cora slept more than she spoke. She'd wake with nightmares, gasping, and I'd sit with her until the fear passed. During the day, she helped with small things, feeding the horses, gathering eggs from the 3 hens I kept. She moved carefully, like someone who'd learned that getting noticed was dangerous. The bruises on her neck faded from purple to yellow. The whip marks healed into thin pink lines, but the brand didn't fade. It sat there on her shoulder blade, raised and angry. The letter W burned deep. I didn't ask about it. Didn't need to. A man who'd mark a child like a farm animal had already told me everything I needed to know about what kind of person he was. On the 8th day, I hitched the mule to the sled and told Cora we were going into town. She went pale. "He'll be there," she said. "I know, but Doc Carver needs to see those injuries, and you need proper clothes." The coat she'd arrived in was ruined, the cloth stiff with dried blood and frozen mud. She didn't argue, just climbed onto the sled and pulled my daughter's coat tight around her shoulders. We rode in silence, the runners hissing over packed snow. The sky was gray and low, threatening more bad weather. By the time we reached Elkhorn, my beard was white with frost. The town wasn't much. A main street lined with fake front buildings, a church at one end, a bar at the other. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys, the smell of burning pine and coal mixing with the sharper smell of the blacksmith's fire. I pulled the mule to a stop in front of Doc Carver's office, a narrow building squeezed between the dry goods store and the land office. We didn't make it to the door. Well, look what the snow dragged back. Silas Whitfield stood on the church steps 20 yards away. He wasn't alone. A small crowd had gathered after Sunday church. Ruth Calloway from the dry goods store, the blacksmith, a handful of ranch workers, the preacher. They all turned to look. Silas walked toward us, his boots crunching loud in the quiet. He was dressed nicely as always, a wool coat with brass buttons, a hat that probably cost more than I made in a month. He stopped 10 feet from the sled and pointed at Cora. "That man," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "is holding my niece against her will. Kidnapped her right out of my home." Whispers rippled through the crowd. I saw Ruth Calloway frown. The blacksmith shook his head. Few others nodded along with Silas. They owed him money. They'd agree with whatever he said. "That true, Jack?" The blacksmith called out. I climbed down from the sled. Cora stayed where she was, small and silent under the coat. She came to my door half frozen, I said. I gave her food and shelter. That's not kidnapping. That's being a good person. Being a good person. Silas laughed, but there wasn't any warmth in it. You think hiding a child from her legal guardian is good? You think ignoring a judge's order is right? He pulled the paper from his coat again and held it up. This here says I'm her guardian. Says I have legal control until she grows up. You want to argue with the territorial judge, Jack? You want to argue with the law? I didn't answer. Just stood there, boots planted in the snow, hands loose at my sides. Didn't think so. Silas folded the paper and tucked it away. Now bring her down from that sled. She's coming home with me. No, the word came from Cora, quiet but clear. She climbed down from the sled before I could stop her. Stood there in the snow facing her uncle. She barely came up to his chest. I'm not going back, she said. Silas's face went hard. You'll do what you're told, girl. No, sir, I won't. For a moment I thought he might hit her right there in the street. His hand twitched, but he caught himself. Remembered the crowd watching. Instead, he smiled. It was worse than the anger. We'll see about that. He turned to talk to the people watching. "This man is breaking the law. I'll be talking to Deputy Ashford this afternoon. By tomorrow we'll have this settled properly." He looked back at me. "You think you're helping her, Jack? You're just making it harder for both of you." He walked away, back toward the land office. The crowd began to break up, folks moving back to their wagons and Sunday dinners. A few looked our way, some with kind faces, others unsure. Ruth Calloway stayed near the store, her face worried. She caught my eye and nodded once, slow and serious. Then she went inside. I took Cora's arm, gently, and walked her toward Doc Carver's door. She was shaking, not from cold this time. Doc Carver was a thin man with gray in his beard and steady hands. He'd been a doctor during the war, seen things that left shadows in his eyes, but he was kind. He checked Cora in the back room while I waited by the stove. The smell of cleaning soap and medicine thick in the air. When he came out, his face was serious. "That brand is 2 weeks old, maybe 3, he said quietly. "The whip marks are older. There's scarring on her back that goes back months." He paused. "This isn't punishment, Jack. This is treating her like an animal. Can you write it down?" "I already have. Photos, measurements, notes. I'll lock it all in my safe." He looked toward the back room where Cora was. "But you need to understand something. Zulus has the law on his side. A guardian can punish a child however he wants. There's no law against it. Not out here. Then the law is broken. Maybe so, but it's still the law." Doc Carver poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot on the stove and handed me one. "You ready for what's coming?" "I don't have much choice. You do. You could put her on the next stage east. Send her to relatives if she's got any. She doesn't. Then you're in for a fight." I drank the coffee. It was bitter and too hot, but I needed something to do with my hands. Through the window, I could see the land office across the street. Silas was visible through the glass, talking to another man. They both looked our way. "Let them come," I said. Doc Carver sighed. "You're a stubborn man, Jack Brennan." "So I've been told." When Cora came out, Doc had given her a clean dress from the charity box the church kept. It was too big, but she'd rolled the sleeves. She looked like a child again, not a ghost. Doc knelt down to her level. "You're going to be fine," he said. "But if you ever need help, you come straight here. Doesn't matter what time it is. Understand?" She nodded. We left through the back door. I didn't want to walk past the land office again. We took the long way around, past the blacksmith shop, where the fire roared and the air smelled of hot metal and coal smoke. When we reached the sled, Deputy Tom Ashford was waiting. He was young, maybe 35, with a badge pinned to his coat and an apologetic look on his face. He held a folded paper in his hand. "Jack," he said, "I'm sorry, but I have to give you this." He handed me the paper. I opened it. The words were legal and formal, but the meaning was simple enough. Silas Whitfield was demanding I pay my debt. $340 due by the 1st of May, 6 weeks from now. "If you can't pay," Deputy Ashford said quietly, "he can take your property, the ranch, the horses, everything." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Cora watched with wide eyes. "Anything else?" I asked. The deputy paused. Then he pulled out a second paper. "He's also filed a complaint. Says you're hiding a runaway. If I find a reason to believe it, I have to bring her back to him. Are you going to do that?" He looked at Cora, looked at me. Then he shook his head slowly. "Not today. But Jackie's not going to let this go. You know that, don't you?" "I know." The deputy tipped his hat and walked away. I climbed onto the sled. Cora climbed up beside me. We rode out of town in silence, the runners cutting through snow that had started to fall again. By the time we reached the ranch, it was dark. I unhitched the mule and fed the horses. Cora sat by the fire, staring at the flames. After a while, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For bringing trouble." I sat down across from her. "You didn't bring trouble. Trouble found you. That's different." She looked at the oiled cloth pouch still sitting on the shelf where she'd left it. "That paper he keeps talking about. The judge's order. What about it?" "It's a lie," she said. "My daddy's will says I get his ranch when I turn 12. That's in July. Uncle Silas wants the land before then. If I'm gone, he gets it all." I understood then. It wasn't about being a guardian. It was about $12,000 in cows and land rights. It was about greed. "He won't get it," I said. "How do you know?" Because I gave you my word you'd be safe and I don't break my word. She looked at me for a long time. Then finally she nodded. Outside, the wind picked up. I could hear it screaming around the roof edges, shaking the shutters. Winter wasn't done with us yet. Neither was Silas Whitfield. Ruth Calloway showed up 2 days later, riding a mule with a basket tied to the saddle. The smell of fresh bread reached me before she did, yeast and butter still warm from the oven. She was a strong woman around 60 with gray hair pinned tight and eyes that didn't miss much. She'd lost her husband to lung sickness 5 years back and her only son to the war 20 years before that. She ran the dry goods store alone and took nonsense from nobody. Figured you could use supplies, she said, climbing down. And company that doesn't come with a badge or a threat. I took the basket. Inside were 2 loaves of bread, a jar of jam, coffee, and a small bag of cornmeal. You didn't have to do this. I know I didn't. She looked toward the cabin. The girl inside. How is she? Good. I want to meet her. Cora was at the table working through the letters I'd been teaching her. She could read some already. Her father had made sure of that, but her schooling had stopped when he died. She looked up when Ruth came in, careful. Don't worry, child, Ruth said. I'm not here to drag you anywhere. She set a smaller bundle on the table wrapped in brown paper. Brought you something. Cora unwrapped it slowly. Inside were 3 dresses, all patched but clean, and a pair of boots only a little too big. Her eyes went wide. I can't pay for these, she said quietly. Didn't ask you to. These were given to the church charity box. Nobody's using them. Ruth pulled out a chair and sat down. Now I want to hear your side of things. Not what Silas says. Not what the town's whispering. You tell me. Cora looked at me. I nodded. She took a breath and started talking. She told it straight. How her father had died in October when his horse threw him during Roundup. How the will said she'd get the ranch, 300 head of cattle, good grazing land, water rights when she turned 12. How Silas had come for her the day after the funeral claiming guardianship. How the first month hadn't been so bad, but then she'd heard him talking to a man from Billings about selling her father's land. When she'd asked about it, he'd told her to mind her own business. That's when he started locking me in the barn at night, she said. Her voice stayed steady, but her hands twisted the cloth of her dress. Said I needed to learn discipline. Said I was ungrateful. Ruth's face went hard. The brand? Cora pulled the collar of her dress aside. The W was still angry red against her skin. He said I was property now, same as his cattle. Ruth closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they were wet. Lord forgive me, but I hope that man suffers. Ruth, I started. Don't Ruth me, Jack Brennan. I've known Silas Whitfield for 15 years. He's a hard man, always has been. But I never thought... She stopped, gathered herself. His daughter died 3 years back. Childbirth, the baby too. He blamed her for being weak, said women were too fragile for this country. She looked at Cora. I think he's been punishing her through you. The cabin fell quiet except for the fire crackling and the wind whispering under the door. Outside, I could hear the horses moving in the pen, their hooves crunching through crusty snow. Ruth stood. I deliver bread to the land office every Wednesday. Silas is always there going through files. She looked at me. If he's planning something, there will be paperwork. I can keep my eyes open. That could put you in danger. I'm an old woman running a store. Nobody pays attention to old women. She pulled her coat tighter. Besides, my store is borrowed money from his bank, too. He comes after you, he might come after me next. I'd rather see trouble coming. She left before the sun set, riding back toward town through the gray afternoon light. After she was gone, Cora tried on the dresses. They fit well enough. She stood by the window in one of them, dark blue with white buttons, and watched the snow beginning to fall again. Why is she helping us? She asked. Because it's right. Lots of people know what's right. They don't all help. She wasn't wrong. I'd seen plenty of folks in town look away when they passed us on the street. Seen them duck into doorways to avoid talking. Fear does that. Fear of debt, fear of power, fear of standing alone. Ruth's different, I said. She buried a son and a husband. Once you've lost that much, you stop being afraid of men like Silas. Cora thought about that. Then she asked, Are you afraid? I was fixing a leather strap for the bridle, the leather stiff and cracked from cold. The smell of leather oil filled the cabin as I worked it into the straps. "I'm afraid of failing you," I said. "I'm afraid of not being strong enough or smart enough when it matters. But I'm not afraid of Silas." "Why not?" "Because I've already lost the things I love most. There's not much he can take from me that hasn't already been taken." She came and sat across from me, watched me work the leather for a while. Then she said, "I found her coat, the one you gave me that first night. There was a name sewn inside. Martha." I didn't look up, just kept working the oil into the bridle. "My daughter. What happened to her?" "Scarlet fever. 3 years ago. She was 9. I set the bridle aside. "We lived 40 miles from the nearest doctor back then. By the time I got her to town, it was too late." "I'm sorry." "So am I." She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. It was small and warm and alive. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she pulled back and picked up the book we'd been reading, a collection of McGuffey's readers I'd kept from Martha's schooling. "Will you teach me the next lesson?" she asked. We worked until the light failed. She was a quick learner, sounding out words carefully, her left hand tracing the lines on the page. When she stumbled, I'd help her. When she got it right, I'd nod. It was a small thing, teaching a child to read. But out here in the middle of winter, with the world pressing in from all sides, it felt like the only thing that mattered. By the time we finished, full dark had fallen. I lit the lamp and started supper. Salt pork and beans, nothing fancy. Cora set the table without being asked. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when two people start to trust each other. After supper, she went to the shelf and took down the oiled cloth pouch. She opened it carefully and pulled out a folded paper, yellowed and creased. She handed it to me. "My daddy's will," she said. "It's the only proof I got. Uncle Silas tried to take it, but I hid it in the barn. That's why I ran. He figured out where it was." I unfolded it. The handwriting was careful and clear. It laid out everything. The land, the cattle, the water rights, all to be kept safe until Cora reached the age of 12, at which point it would go to her free and clear. It was witnessed and stamped legal. "He needs this gone," I said. "Without it, he can claim there was no will, though you're just an orphan with no rights. That's why I can't let him have it." I folded the paper and handed it back. "Then we keep it safe. And come July, you take what's yours." She put it back in the pouch and set it on the shelf. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, the fire burned warm. We sat together in the lamplight, and for a little while, the world outside didn't matter. But I knew it wouldn't last. Men like Silas don't give up. They just change plans. And somewhere out there in the dark, he was planning his next move. March came in cold and mean. The snow turned to ice, then back to snow, then to slush that froze hard at night and made every step dangerous. The horses grew shaggy and bad-tempered. The chickens stopped laying, and Deputy Tom Ashford rode up to the cabin with a paper that might as well have been a death sentence. He didn't get off his horse, just sat there and held out the folded document, his breath steaming in the gray morning air. "Eviction notice," he said. "Silas called in your debt. 340's due by the 1st of May. If you can't pay, the ranch goes to the bank." I took the paper. The words were formal and cold. Legal stealing dressed up in official language. 6 weeks. "I'm sorry, Jack. I tried to talk him out of it." The deputy's face was troubled. "But he owns the bill and the law's on his side." "Law seems to be on his side a lot lately." Ashford looked away. "I don't like it either, but I wear a badge. I enforce what's written, not what's fair. You ever wonder if there's a difference?" He didn't answer, just turned his horse and rode back toward town, the animal's hooves breaking through the crust of ice with each step. The sound echoed in the stillness long after he disappeared into the trees. Inside, Cora was adding kindling to the fire. She looked up when I came in, saw my face, and went still. "What happened?" I told her, watched the color drain from her face as she understood what it meant. No ranch meant no place to keep her. No place to keep her meant Silas won. "How much do you have?" she asked. $70, maybe $80 if I sell the mule and 2 of the horses. That's not enough. No, it's not. She stood there, small and fierce in one of Ruth's hand-me-down dresses. Her hands balled into fists. "It's my fault. If I hadn't come here..." "Stop." I walked to her, knelt down so we were eye to eye. "You didn't bring this. Silas did. He's the one twisting the law to get what he wants. You're just a child trying to survive." But you're going to lose everything because of me. I already lost everything that mattered 3 years ago when Martha died. I put a hand on her shoulder. This ranch is just wooden land. You're alive. There's no choice to make here. She started to cry, quiet sobs that shook her whole body. I pulled her close and let her cry it out. The smell of wood smoke stuck to her hair. Outside, a crow called, harsh and lonely. When she'd calmed down, I made us coffee. Weak because supplies were running low and we sat by the fire. I had 2 choices and neither was good. I could try to get the money, which was nearly impossible, or I could take Cora and run, head west to Oregon Territory where Silas's reach didn't go. But running meant looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives, meant teaching her that might makes right, that powerful men always win. I couldn't do that. Wouldn't. We fight, I said. How? I don't know yet. But Ruth's watching. Doc has proof, and somewhere Silas has a weak spot. Every man does. 3 days later, Silas called a town meeting. Not official business, just an invitation delivered by hand to every property owner in Elkhorn. The meeting would be held at the church Sunday after service. The subject: community concerns about protecting children. Ruth came out to warn me. It's a trap, she said, standing in my doorway with snow melting off her shawl. He's going to make you look like a criminal in front of everyone. Get them on his side before any of this goes to a real court. I'm going anyway. I figured you'd say that, she sighed. Then I'm going too, and I'm bringing anyone who'll listen to reason. Sunday came clear and cold. The sky was that hard blue you only see in winter, and the sunlight off the snow was bright enough to hurt. I dressed in my best shirt, which wasn't saying much, and hitched the mule to the sled. Cora wore the blue dress Ruth had brought, and I wrapped Martha's coat around her shoulders. You don't have to come, I told her. Yes, I do. This is about me. I should be there. We rode into town in silence. The church was already full when we arrived. Folks packed into the benches, their voices a low hum that stopped when we walked through the door. I felt every eye on us, some kind, most unsure, a few openly mean. Silas stood at the front next to the preacher's podium. He was dressed like a politician. Black suit, white shirt, string tie. He looked successful and respectable. Everything I wasn't. When he saw us, he smiled. Good of you to come, Jack, and you brought the girl. Even better. He talked to the crowd. Folks, thank you for gathering. I know it's cold and you've got work waiting, but this affects all of us. It affects the rule of law in this territory. He let that hang in the air. Then he pulled out the guardianship paper and held it up. This document, signed by Judge Whitaker himself, names me as Cora Whitfield's legal guardian. My brother, God rest him, died without proper plans for his daughter. As her only living relative, it falls to me to raise her, to see to her education and welfare. He paused, but Mr. Brennan has decided the law doesn't apply to him. He's hiding a child against her guardian's wishes. That's kidnapping, plain and simple. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I saw heads nodding. Silas had them. Now I'm a patient man, he continued. I've tried reasoning with Jack. I've sent the deputy with proper notice. But he refuses to obey, and that puts all of us at risk. Because if one man can ignore the law, what's to stop others? What's to stop chaos? He turned to look at me. I don't want trouble, Jack. I just want my niece returned to her rightful home. Is that so much to ask? The church was silent. Everyone waited. I could feel Cora trembling beside me. I stood and stepped into the aisle. You want to talk about law? I said. Let's talk about it. You brand a child like cattle. Is that lawful? You lock her in a barn at night. Is that proper guardianship? You fake documents to steal her inheritance. Is that righteous? Gasps. Silas's face went red. That's a lie. It's truth. I looked at the crowd. Doc Carver's got photos of what he did to her. Photos of the brand on her shoulder, the whip marks on her back. Any of you want to see them? Punishing a child is a guardian's right. Silas's voice rose. You don't have children, Jack. You don't understand what it takes to raise a stubborn girl in this country. I had a daughter. She died before you could teach me how to beat her into obedience. The words came out harder than I'd meant them. The church went completely quiet. I saw Ruth in the third row, her eyes shining. Saw Doc Carver near the back, arms crossed. Saw Deputy Ashford by the door, his face troubled. Silas recovered quickly. I feel sorry for your loss, Jack. I truly do. But your pain doesn't give you the right to steal another man's family. He turned back to the crowd. He owes my bank $340. Come May, he'll lose his land. Is that the kind of man you want raising a child? A man in debt, a thief? Someone in the crowd called out, "How'd he come to owe you that money, Silas?" It was the blacksmith, a big man with soot-stained hands. Silas blinked. What? Just wondering how a man who doesn't borrow much suddenly owes you money right when he takes in your niece. Seems convenient. I don't like your tone. And I don't like you using the law like a weapon, the blacksmith said. Jack Brennan's been in this valley longer than most of us. Never caused trouble, never asked for much. Now you're saying he's a criminal because he gave shelter to a freezing child? Whispers again, but this time they were different, unsure. Silas's jaw tightened. The law is clear. If he doesn't return Cora by week's end, I'll have the marshal brought in from Helena. This isn't a negotiation. He turned and walked out, his boots loud on the wooden floor. The crowd began to break up, folks leaving in small groups, talking in low voices. Ruth came over, squeezed my arm. Doc Carver nodded. Deputy Ashford came up slowly. He's not lying about the marshal, he said quietly. Once that happens, it's out of my hands. I know, Jack. He looked at Cora, then back at me. The law isn't always fair, but it's all we got. Without it, we're just animals. And when the law protects animals over children, what then? He had no answer. He left. Outside, the sun was already dropping. The temperature was falling fast, the way it does in March. Winter's last cruel joke. Cora and I climbed onto the sled. As we pulled away, I saw Silas standing outside the land office watching us. Even from a distance, I could see the anger in his posture. He'd expected to win today, expected the town to turn against me. It hadn't quite worked, but he'd drawn the lines clear. Come May, I'd lose the ranch, and without the ranch, I'd have no ground to stand on. Cora was quiet on the ride home. When we reached the cabin, she went straight to the shelf and took down the oiled cloth pouch. She held it for a long time, staring at it. What if I gave him the land? She said, what if I just signed it over? Then he'd leave you alone. No, but that land is yours. Your father worked himself to death to build it. You don't hand it over to a man who'd rather hurt you than let you have it. Then what do we do? I looked out the window. The sun was gone, the sky fading to deep purple. Stars were beginning to show, cold and distant. We wait, I said, and we hope Ruth finds something we can use. But hope felt thin that night. Thin as the ice forming on the water bucket. Thin as the thread holding my whole life together. April crept in with mud and cold rain. The snow didn't melt so much as rot away, leaving the ground soft and dangerous. The horses sank to their ankles in the muck. Water dripped from the cabin roof edges in an endless rhythm that sounded like a clock counting down. I sold 2 horses to a rancher passing through. Got $40 for the pair, sold the mule for $20 more. That gave me $140 total, still $200 short. The 1st of May was 3 weeks away. Cora had gone quiet. Not the frightened quiet of when she first arrived, but something harder, determined. She worked alongside me without complaining, feeding the remaining horses, carrying water from the creek, chopping kindling. Her hands got rough and calloused. She didn't ask about the debt anymore. Didn't talk much at all. One afternoon, I found her in the corner of the cabin where I kept my tools. She had Martha's old McGuffey's reader open on her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was copying words onto a scrap of paper, practicing her letters. Her left hand moved carefully across the page, forming each letter carefully. "What are you working on?" I asked. She showed me. It was her name written over and over. Cora Whitfield. Cora Whitfield. Cora Whitfield. The letters were neat and clear, all slanting slightly to the left the way a left-handed person's writing does. "Why?" I asked. "So I don't forget who I am," she said. "No matter what happens." I sat down next to her. The smell of wet earth and old wood filled the cabin. Outside, rain pattered on the tin roof, a sound both comforting and endless. "You want to learn something?" I asked. She nodded. "Come with me." I took her out to the pen where I kept the last 3 horses, 2 mares and a young stallion I'd been working with since fall. He was wild-caught, maybe 4 years old, with a black coat and white blaze down his face, mean as spit when I'd first roped him. But I'd been gentling him slowly. Patience, not force. The stallion eyed us as we walked up, ears back, nostrils wide. "This is trust," I said. You can break a horse with whips and spurs. Make him fear you so much he'll obey. But that's not trust. That's just fear wearing a saddle. I climbed over the fence. The stallion tossed his head but didn't run. I moved slowly, keeping my hands visible, talking low and steady. When I got close enough, I held out my palm. The stallion snorted, danced sideways, then finally stretched his neck and sniffed my hand. You earn it, I said. Little bit at a time. You show him you're not there to hurt him. Eventually, he stops expecting pain. That's when real work can begin. Cora watched from the fence. Can I try? You sure? She nodded. I helped her over the fence. The stallion's ears moved forward, curious. Cora was smaller than me, less threatening. She held out her hand the way I had, palm up, fingers loose. Talk to him, I said. Use that voice you use when you're scared, the quiet one. She did. A whisper, soft and steady. The same tone she'd used that first night when she asked if she was real. The stallion took a step closer, then another. Finally, he lowered his head and touched her palm with his nose. Cora's face lit up. Not quite a smile. She didn't smile much yet, but something close. Something like hope. He trusts you, I said. How do you know? Because he's letting you be close. That's all trust is. Letting someone be close even when you're afraid they might hurt you. We worked with the horse for an hour until the rain picked up and drove us inside. That night I made stew from the last of the salt pork. We ate by firelight, the cabin warm and dry despite the storm raging outside. Cora asked me about training horses, about how long it took, whether they ever forgot their fear. Depends, I said. Some horses carry it their whole lives. Others let it go once they learn different. People are the same way. She thought about that. Do you think I'll forget? Forget what? Being afraid. I set down my spoon. I don't think you forget. But I think maybe you learn to carry it differently. Learn that being afraid doesn't mean being broken. She nodded slowly. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was moving east toward town. 3 weeks to May, she said. I know. What happens if we can't pay? Then we figure out the next thing. What's the next thing? I didn't have an answer, so I just said, we'll know when we get there. But the truth was, I didn't know. The money wasn't coming. The land would go to Silas's bank. And without the ranch, I had no legal way to keep Cora. Deputy Ashford had made that clear. A man without property was a homeless person, and homeless people didn't get to raise children. I lay awake that night listening to the rain, and Cora's breathing from the corner where she slept. The fire had burned down to coals. In the darkness, I could almost see Martha's face, the way she'd looked the last time I'd seen her alive. Fever bright and asking for water. I'd failed her, ridden 40 miles to fetch a doctor who'd arrived too late. I couldn't fail again, but I was running out of options and time and hope. The rain fell harder. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch cracked and fell, and the sound of it felt like an ending. Ruth showed up on a Wednesday, 2 weeks before the debt came due. She rode through the mud with her skirts soaked to the knees and her face set hard. I knew before she said a word that she'd found something. Land office, she said, climbing down from her horse. I was delivering bread like always. Silas was arguing with his bank partner, man named Garrett from Helena. They didn't know I was in the back room. Inside, she sat by the fire and pulled a folded paper from inside her coat. The paper was damp but readable. I recognized the territorial seal at the top. Orphan train contract, Ruth said. Dated February 20th. Says Cora Whitfield voluntarily agrees to move east for proper schooling and placement with a Christian family. It's signed by her, witnessed by Silas. Cora went pale. I never signed that. I know you didn't, Ruth pointed to the signature. Look at the handwriting. It slants right. You're left-handed. Your writing slants left. I checked with Doc Carver. He had you write your name when he examined you. This signature is fake. I held the paper up to the light. This signature was neat and careful. Too neat, practiced. He's planning to put her on the train, I said. Train leaves June 10th, Ruth confirmed. Once she's gone, he can claim she ran away. Without her here to fight it, the inheritance goes to him as next of kin. Cora's hands were shaking. Can we show this to the deputy? Ruth shook her head, not yet. Silas will just say she signed it and forgot, or that she's lying to stay with Jack. We need more. Like what? Like why he needs that land so badly right now. Ruth leaned forward. I heard him tell Garrett the bank examiner's coming in June. He said something about covering the shortfall before anyone notices. Those were his exact words. The pieces started fitting together. A man doesn't fake documents and demand debts unless he's desperate. And Silas was desperate. He's stealing from the bank, I said. That's my guess. Cora's inheritance is $12,000. If he can get that land and sell it quick, he can cover whatever he took before the examiner arrives. I looked at Cora. She sat very still, her face pale but her eyes sharp. She understood what this meant. Her uncle wasn't just cruel. He was a thief using her to save himself. We need proof, I said. I'm working on it. Ruth's voice dropped. But Jack, this is dangerous. If Silas finds out I'm looking, he'll come after me. My store has borrowed money from his bank too. Then stop looking. I didn't say I was stopping. I said it's dangerous. She stood. I'll keep my ears open. You just keep that girl safe. She left before the sun set, riding back through the mud toward town. After she was gone, Cora came and stood beside me at the window. We watched the sky turn purple, the clouds breaking apart to show stars. He's going to win, isn't he? She said. Not if I can help it, but you can't pay the debt and he's got the law on his side. I turned to face her. The law is just words on paper. What matters is what people choose to believe. And Ruth believes you. Doc believes you. Even the blacksmith's starting to ask questions. That's 3 people against a whole town. 3 is more than 0. She looked up at me. Why are you doing this? You could just let me go. Save your ranch. The ranch is wood and nails. You're alive, but you already lost so much. That's exactly why I knelt down so we were eye level. When Martha died, I thought I was done. Thought I'd just work this land until it buried me too. Then you showed up half frozen, asking if you were real. And I remembered what it felt like to matter to someone. To have a reason to get up in the morning. I paused. You saved me, Cora. Least I can do is return the favor. Her eyes filled with tears. She threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. I held her back. This small, fierce girl who'd walked through a blizzard with nothing but a piece of paper and a question. Outside, the night settled in. The mud would freeze again by morning. The debt was still coming. Silas was still planning. But for now, in this moment, we had each other. And sometimes that's enough to keep fighting. The next morning, I rode into town alone. Cora wanted to come, but I told her to stay with the horses. What I was about to do didn't need witnesses. I found Silas at the land office, sitting behind a desk covered in ledgers and papers. He looked up when I walked in, his face showing neither surprise nor concern. Come to beg? He asked. Come to make you an offer? I'm listening. You drop the debt. Give me clear title to my land. In exchange, I'll convince Cora to sign over her inheritance. No fight, no fuss. Silas leaned back in his chair. For a moment, I thought he might actually consider it. Then he smiled. No, he said. I'll have both. Your land and hers. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard him laugh. But I'd gotten what I came for. I'd seen his face when I mentioned the inheritance. Seen the hunger there, the desperation barely hidden. Ruth was right. He needed that money. Needed it bad. And desperate men make mistakes. The 1st of May came with a morning so clear it hurt to look at. The sky was blue and endless. The kind of day that makes you believe in second chances. I didn't believe in them anymore. Deputy Ashford arrived at noon with a surveyor and a clerk from the territorial office. They carried papers and measuring chains and expressions that said they'd done this before and would do it again. The law was the law, and the law didn't care about clear skies. I'm sorry, Jack, Ashford said. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You got till sundown to clear out. I nodded. Cora stood in the doorway behind me, her face pale but set. We'd talked about this, knew it was coming, but knowing doesn't make it easier. Where will you go? The deputy asked. Don't know yet. He looked past me at Cora. You know what happens next, don't you? Without property, you've got no legal standing to keep her. Silas will file for immediate custody. I know. You could make this easier for both of you. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a young man trying to do his job, trying to enforce rules he didn't believe in because the alternative was chaos. But there's a difference between law and justice, and he knew it. I could see it in his eyes. No, I said. I couldn't. They measured and marked and wrote everything down in careful handwriting. By mid-afternoon, the ranch officially belonged to Silas Whitfield's bank. The cabin, the pen, the 3 remaining horses, all of it. The surveyor hammered a stake into the ground near the fence line and tied a red ribbon to it. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze like a flag of surrender. After they left, Cora and I stood in the yard. The sun was warm on our faces. Birds sang in the cottonwood trees. The world didn't care that we'd just lost everything. "What now?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Just stood there looking at the cabin I'd built with my own hands. The fence line I'd fixed 100 times. The grave marker in the corner of the property where Martha was buried. Leaving felt like dying, but staying meant watching Silas take Cora, and I'd burn the place down before I let that happen. "We pack what we can carry," I said, "and we figure out the rest as we go." Inside, I gathered Martha's coat, the McGuffey's reader, a blanket, some tools. Cora wrapped the oiled cloth pouch with her father's will in a cloth and tucked it inside her dress. We moved quietly and efficiently, like soldiers leaving a battlefield. I was loading the saddlebags when I heard it. The church bell in town ringing hard and fast, not the slow, measured toll for service. This was urgent, alarmed. Cora heard it too. "What does that mean?" "Trouble. Or a call to gather." I looked toward town. The sound carried clear across the distance, echoing off the hills. Ruth. I knew it in my bones. Ruth had found something, and she was calling the town to witness it. This was the move we'd been waiting for. "Stay here," I told Cora. "No." Her voice was firm. "This is about me. I should be there." I wanted to argue, wanted to keep her safe, hidden, away from whatever was about to happen. But she was right. This was her fight as much as mine. "All right," I said. "But you stay close to me no matter what." We rode together on the last horse, moving fast through the mud-rutted road toward town. The bell kept ringing, insistent and loud. As we got closer, I could see people streaming toward the church from all directions. Ranch workers and shopkeepers, families and drifters. Whatever Ruth had done, she'd made sure everyone would see it. When we reached the church, the crowd was already thick. Folks moved aside to let us through, their faces curious and unsure. At the front steps, Ruth stood holding a stack of papers. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with something between triumph and terror. Beside her stood Doc Carver, and beside him, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, stood Deputy Ashford. Silas was there too, standing near the church door. His face was red with anger. Ruth saw me and nodded. Then she raised her voice to carry across the crowd. "Folks," she said, "I got something to show you. Something you all need to see before this goes any further." She held up the papers. Even from a distance, I could see the territorial seal. Official documents, the kind that told truths men like Silas wanted buried. "This here," Ruth said, "is proof that Silas Whitfield has been stealing from his own bank. $11,800 to be exact. And he's been using that little girl's inheritance to cover his tracks." The crowd erupted. Silas lunged toward Ruth, but Doc Carver stepped between them. Deputy Ashford's hand went to his gun. "You lying witch," Silas shouted. "Those are private bank records." "You had no right." "I had every right," Ruth said. Her voice was steady. "Because you were about to ruin an innocent man and steal from a child to save your own skin." She looked at me, then at Cora, then back at the crowd. "Now somebody better decide," she said, "if we're a town that protects children or a town that protects thieves." The bell had stopped ringing. In the silence that followed, every eye turned toward Silas Whitfield. And I knew finally that we'd won. The preacher stepped forward, his Bible held in both hands. He was an old man, thin and gray, but his voice carried weight. "This is the house of God," he said. "And in this house we settle things according to his law, not man's greed." He looked at Silas. "You stand accused of theft and fraud. You got anything to say?" Silas's face had gone from red to white. His hands shook. "Those records are sealed." She had no authority. "I had a key," Ruth said calmly. "You gave it to me yourself, remember? Said I could use the back room to store dry goods overflow. You never thought an old woman delivering bread would be paying attention." She held up the papers again. "But I did. And I saw the ledgers, saw the withdrawals, saw how the numbers didn't match." Deputy Ashford stepped forward. "Let me see those." Ruth handed them over. The deputy read slowly, his lips moving slightly. When he finished, he looked up at Silas. "This true?" You've been taking from depositors' accounts. It was temporary. I was going to pay it back. With Cora's inheritance? Doc Carver said. That's why you needed her land. Why you faked the orphan train papers. The crowd pressed closer. I saw the blacksmith, the store clerks, ranch workers I recognized. They were listening now. Really listening. Zelu straightened his coat, trying to get back some dignity. Even if that were true, which I'm not admitting, the girl's still my ward. The judge signed based on your testimony that you were a fit guardian, Ruth interrupted. But Doc Carver's got photos of what you did to her. The brand, the whip marks. That sound like a fit guardian to you? Whispers rippled through the crowd. Angry whispers. The preacher raised his hand for quiet. There's a law in this territory. Old homestead law from the 50s, back when judges were scarce, says in cases of disputed guardianship, a town congregation can vote on placement, provided there's evidence of harm or unfitness. That law is outdated, Silas started. That law is still on the books, Deputy Ashford said quietly. I checked last week. Preacher's right, the preacher nodded. Then we'll do this properly, according to both God's law and territorial law. He turned to Cora. Child, do you wish to speak? Cora had been standing beside me, silent and still. Now she stepped forward. She was small against the backdrop of the church, just a girl in a hand-me-down dress. But when she spoke, her voice didn't shake. My name is Cora Whitfield, she said. My daddy died last October. Before he died, he wrote a will. Says I get his ranch when I turn 12. That's 2 months from now. She reached into her dress and pulled out the oiled cloth pouch. Her hands were steady as she opened it and took out the yellowed paper. This is the will. It's legal and witnessed. My uncle wanted it gone so he could take the land himself. She held up her left arm, showing the sleeve. Then she pulled it back, showing the brand on her shoulder. The crowd gasped. Some of the women looked away. He did this to me, she said. Said I was his property, like a cow, like something he could mark and sell. Her voice broke slightly, but she kept going. Mr. Brennan found me in a blizzard. I was dying. He didn't have to help me. He didn't know me. But he did. And he's been protecting me ever since, even when it cost him everything. She looked at me then. Her eyes were wet but clear. He taught me I'm worth more than a piece of paper. That I'm real even without the deed. That I matter. She turned back to the crowd. I'm asking you, please don't send me back, please. The silence that followed was heavy and complete. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then the preacher spoke. We'll put it to a vote. All in favor of granting temporary guardianship to Jacob Brennan until Cora reaches her majority. Say aye. The blacksmith's voice came first, loud and clear. To then Ruth, Doc Carver. One by one, voices rose from the crowd. Not all of them. Some stayed silent, afraid of crossing Silas or afraid of upsetting the order of things. But enough. More than enough. When the count finished, it was 14-6. The preacher nodded. Then it settled. Jacob Brennan is granted temporary guardianship until Cora Whitfield reaches age 12 and can claim her inheritance. He looked at Silas. As for you, Deputy Ashford will be taking you into custody pending investigation of the bank records. Silas's face twisted. For a moment I thought he might run or fight, but then something inside him collapsed. He just stood there, shoulders sagging, all the fight gone out of him. I needed the money, he said quietly. My daughter died. The medical bills, I couldn't cover them. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was going to— You branded a child, Ruth said. Her voice was hard as iron. Whatever debt you had, you paid it onto her. And that isn't forgivable. Deputy Ashford took Silas by the arm. Come on, we'll sort this out properly. As they walked away, Silas looked back once at Cora. I don't know what he saw in her face. Forgiveness, maybe, or just the cold finality of judgment. Either way, he turned and didn't look back again. The crowd began to break up, folks talking in low voices as they drifted toward their wagons and horses. Ruth came over and put her hand on my shoulder. You got your ranch back, she said. Silas's bank will be taken over by the territory. Your debts are erased. How'd you know about the ledgers? I asked. She smiled, tired but satisfied. I told you. Nobody pays attention to old women. And old women pay attention to everything. She looked at Cora. You did good, child. Took real courage to speak up like that. Cora nodded but didn't speak. She was trembling now, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Doc Carver came up, his medical bag in hand. "Let me check you both over. You've been through hell." "We're all right," I said. "Humor an old doctor." We sat on the church steps while he checked Cora's pulse and looked at her eyes. The sun was warm now, the sky that perfect blue that only comes in late spring. The smell of prairie grass and distant rain hung in the air. Somewhere a meadowlark sang. "You know what happens now?" Doc asked. "We go home," I said. "Fix what's broken. Plant a garden, live," he smiled. "Sounds like a plan." We rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon. The red ribbon still fluttered on the surveyor's stake, but it didn't matter anymore. The land was ours again. The cabin stood solid and waiting. When we got inside, Cora set the oiled cloth pouch on the shelf. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned to me. "Can I call you Pa?" she asked. I couldn't speak for a moment, just nodded. She threw her arms around me and held on tight. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwood trees. Spring was coming. The mud would dry, the grass would green, and we would heal. 2 weeks later, we burned the branding iron. Ruth had suggested it, said symbols matter, and this one needed putting to rest. So on a Sunday morning, clear and warm, we rode into town with the iron wrapped in burlap. The church was full for service, and afterward folks stayed on the steps talking and trading news the way they do when winter finally breaks. The preacher met us at the door. He'd agreed to let us use the church stove for what Ruth was calling a ritual of closure. Fancy words for destroying the thing that had marked Cora like cattle. Inside, the church smelled of old wood and candle wax. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the floor in gold. Doc Carver was there, and Ruth and a handful of others who'd voted for us. Even Deputy Ashford showed up, standing quietly in the back. I unwrapped the iron. The metal was cold and heavy, the W still visible on the branding end. Cora stood beside me, her hand in mine. She'd asked to be the one to put it in the fire. "You sure?" I asked. She nodded. The preacher opened the stove door. The fire inside burned hot and clean, fed with dry pine. Cora took the iron from me. Her hands didn't shake. She walked to the stove and pushed the brand into the flames. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metal began to glow. First red, then orange, then white. The W softened and bent, the shape losing form until it was just melted metal and heat. "May it never mark another soul," the preacher said quietly. We stood there until the iron was nothing but melted metal. Then Ruth stepped forward and rang the church bell. Not the alarm ring from before, but a slow, steady toll. A sound of ending and beginning both. When the bell stopped, Cora turned to me. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah," I said. "We can go home." That afternoon we planted a garden. The ground was soft from spring rain, rich and dark. Cora had never planted anything before, so I showed her how to space the seeds, how deep to set them, how to cover them gently and give them room to grow. We planted beans and corn and squash, the three sisters, like the old-timers called them. We planted wildflowers, too, along the edge where the fence met the open prairie. Cora chose the spot right where I'd found her that February night, collapsed in the snow. "So something beautiful grows here," she said. We worked until the sun began to sink. Our hands were dirty, our backs sore, but it was good work, the kind that makes you tired in a way that feels like accomplishment. That evening, Ruth came by with a basket of food, bread and cheese and dried apples. She sat with us by the fire while we ate, and we talked about small things. The weather, the garden, the way the grass was coming in green after the long winter. "Deputy told me they're transferring Silas to the territorial prison in Deer Lodge," Ruth said. 5 years for theft. Could have been worse. Could have been better, I said. "Could have." She looked at Cora. "You ever think about forgiving him?" Cora was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I think about it. But I'm not there yet. Maybe someday." Ruth nodded. "That's honest. Forgiveness isn't something you do because you're supposed to. It's something you do when you're ready. Or not at all. Either way is all right." After Ruth left, Cora and I sat outside on the porch steps. The stars were coming out, sharp and bright in the clear sky. A nighthawk called somewhere in the distance. The air smelled of fresh-turned earth and pine. "You ever miss her?" Cora asked. "Martha? Every day. Does it get easier?" "Not easier, different." I looked up at the stars. "You learn to carry it. Learn that loving someone doesn't end just because they're gone. Just changes shape. She leaned against my shoulder. We sat like that for a while, not talking, just being. A father and daughter under the wide Montana sky. Pa, she said finally, yeah? Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for not letting me. In July, Cora turned 12. We rode into town to file the papers that made her inheritance official. 300 head of cattle, 200 acres of grazing land, and water rights to the creek that ran through it. The land office clerk processed everything without comment, stamped the documents and handed them over. Congratulations, Miss Whitfield, he said. You're a property owner. She folded the papers carefully and put them in the oiled cloth pouch. But this time when we left, she didn't hold them like they were the only proof she existed. She just tucked them in her saddlebag and smiled. Feels different now, she said. How so? Before, the paper was all I had. Now it's just paper. I'm real whether I got it or not. We rode home through the summer heat. The garden had come in full. Beans climbing their poles, corn forming tassels, squash spreading across the ground. The wildflowers bloomed in a riot of color where the snow had once been deep and cold. That night we had a quiet celebration, just the two of us, a good meal and the sound of the creek running clear and strong. After supper, Cora pulled the McGuffey's reader from the shelf and read aloud by lamplight. Her voice was steady and sure, the words flowing easy. When she finished, she closed the book and looked at me. What do we do tomorrow? Same as today, I said. We live, we work. We take care of each other. Sounds good to me. She smiled then, a real smile, full and open. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her smile like that. Maybe never. Outside, the night settled in, soft and warm. The horses dozed in the pen. The garden grew in the dark. And somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its evening song. We were home. Finally, truly home. 5 years on. I'm writing this from the porch of the cabin Cora and I built together. The old one's still standing, but we added on. A room for her, a workshop for me, a proper kitchen. The garden's bigger now and we keep chickens and a milk cow. The 3 sisters come up every spring without fail. Cora's 17 now, tall and strong with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. She manages her ranch herself, rides the fence lines, bargains with buyers in town. Folks respect her. Some even fear her a little, the way you fear someone who survived what should have killed them and came out harder for it. She still lives here with me, though her own land's just 5 miles west. Says she'll build there someday when she's ready. For now, she likes the company. So do I. We heard Silas died last winter in the territorial prison, pneumonia. Cora took the news quietly. Didn't say much. That night, though, I found her standing in the garden where we'd planted the wildflowers. She stood there a long time, hands in her pockets, looking at the stars. You all right? I asked. I don't know, she said. I thought I'd feel something. Relief maybe, or anger. But I just feel tired. That's grief, I said. Even for people who hurt us, she nodded. We stood together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds. Crickets and distant coyotes and the wind moving through the grass. People ask me sometimes why I risked everything for a child that wasn't mine by blood. I tell them what I told Cora that first week. She was mine the second she asked if she was real, and I've been answering that question every day since. With a roof, a fire, and a name she chose to keep. Family isn't the name on a paper. It's who you'd walk through a blizzard for. And I'd walk through 1,000 blizzards for her. The meadowlark sings at dawn now, right where I found her all those years ago. Every morning its song reminds me, winter doesn't last forever. Spring always comes.